Welcome to Movies You Missed Podcast, the show where film industry veterans recommend movies to you without spoiling them.
Oh yeah, no spoilers here.
I'm Vee.
And I'm John.
And today we're going to be diving into the comedy of Chris Farley.
Yes, rest in peace to Chris Farley.
How you doing today, John?
I'm doing pretty good, Vee. How are you doing this day?
I'm doing well, and I'm really glad we selected comedies after the couple episodes we've done that are a lot more serious.
Absolutely, yes. Always good to have a good laugh, especially when it comes to Chris Farley.
I really like putting in those palate cleansers in between our more serious films that we choose.
Oh yeah, same. And I think our audience might enjoy it as well.
Yes, please let us know. Thank you everyone for joining, whether you're brand new to the podcast or have been with us for the last 106 episodes. We really appreciate you joining us. You know, before we dive into the movies we chose this week, we like to discuss the movies we saw in theaters or on streaming.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, I only saw one new 2024 movie this week, but I did get to go to the theaters for a very special occasion. So I'll start off with the 2024 movie that I put myself through.
Oh yeah, now I remember.
I watched Madam Web at home. It's the best description. You know what's funny, though, is that I think with a different leading actress, this movie could have been kind of good.
Kind of good, yeah?
The storyline was compelling. It could have been really interesting and could have been a pretty good superhero movie, but
Yeah.
Dakota Johnson, no offense, but she cannot act. She's a Nepo baby. She has not shown me any range whatsoever in all the movies I've seen her in.
I don't think I've seen anything that she's in, honestly. I've recently been listening to the entire trilogy of the How Did This Get Made 50 Shades episodes. And, I mean, they already dump on a lot of movies, but the way that they dump on those movies just... And they play some audio clips, too, and my God, it just sounds absolutely atrocious.
They are absolutely atrocious movies. They're some of the worst movies I've ever seen. I've put myself through all three just out of morbid curiosity. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so back when they were released, I didn't see them in theaters.
Oh, good.
Not that terrible, but I did put myself through watching them streaming on HBO Max at the time. And they're bad, but she is just so wooden. She's exactly like Kristen Stewart was in Twilight, which is perfect because it's Twilight fan fiction, of course.
Yeah, I found that out during the listening to the How Did This Get Made episodes. Exactly. I'm like, how? What the? What?
And then I watched her at Bad Times at the El Royale, which is a good movie, but she is not. That's
right, she is. That is actually a pretty badass movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's the most forgettable part of it.
Exactly. Chris Hemsworth kills it. But she's just not good. So she's not a good actress. I will say that with data behind me. No offense. My apologies, but it's a fact. And so she was just so wooden and looked like she did not want to be there, looked like she thought this movie was stupid from the beginning, and just did not convey any sense of passion or any emotional range whatsoever as an actress. So
wow.
If they had cast someone else, there's potential this movie could have been not terrible.
All right. Well, you took the bullet for that one. I told you I likely would not see that one. When we were hanging out the last time, you said we should go see it, and I said, no, I'm not doing it. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a female-led movie. Everybody knows here at Movies You Missed, I am a big advocate for female-led movies, but...
Even female-led comic book movies, because The Marvels was one of your favorite movies last year.
I remember the trailer and just being like, this looks like a rehash of Edge of Tomorrow, and this the worst way possible.
Oh, God, don't even speak its name in the presence of Madam Web. That's just insulting.
Well, there you go.
But I will say we're now even because you took the bullet for me last year by watching Aquaman.
Yeah, I did. Yes, I did. All right, 2 bullets. We've done it.
So next it's your turn.
I guess it is. I guess so.
But thankfully, I was able to redeem my movie-going experience because I was able to go and watch the 25th anniversary showing of The Mummy.
Yeah.
In theaters, I had a great time. It was so wonderful to see it back on the big screen because I had seen it when it was premiered back in the 90s, and it's coming up on our list, so I'm very thrilled to be talking about that on our podcast in the near future.
Hell yeah, great movie. I saw it when it was re-released back in like 2013 in theaters.
Nice.
And yeah, it was awesome. I almost went this weekend, but I did not. I went to see another one, which we'll get into in a minute.
Well, I think that's actually the perfect time to get into it because that is my recap for the movies I saw this week.
All right, perfect. One bad, one fantastic revisit. Fantastic times. Well, in the vein of revisiting, I went to the theaters on Saturday night to see the 45th year anniversary re-release of Ridley Scott directing Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, and a whole bunch of other fantastic actors in Alien. Oh, man. What a treat that was to see it again on the big screen. I saw it years ago at the Beverly Cinema, which is the Quentin Tarantino-owned theater on Beverly Boulevard in West Hollywood, and that was a 35mm print. I don't think this one was a 35mm print, but it still was awesome. The sound was deafening. The copy of it was great. The theater was about 6 people, which was a little bit heartbreaking, but it still was a great experience. I had a fantastic time, and if anybody has not yet been able to check it out, I think it's playing for one more night. I think tonight, actually, Wednesday will be the final night that it will be in theaters this week. So if you have a chance to get to the theaters, give it a shot. If not, just watch it at home with a very loud speaker.
And then listen to episode 28 where I discuss it.
Yes, indeed. V's pick for our first section of horror movies back in 2022 of October.
That's right.
Sweet. And just before that, actually, a few days before that, my wife and I watched a new movie on streaming. My wife actually wanted to see this in theaters. We didn't get a chance to see it. This movie stars Margaret Qualley and Geraldine Viswanathan and Beanie Feldstein. Beanie Feldstein was in my pick for Booksmart many episodes ago. I'm talking about Drive Away Dolls. This movie is very entertaining. It's an hour and 24 minutes of good comedy. Pedro Pascal and Matt Damon are also in it. It is not at all what I thought it was going to be. I think I saw one trailer for it several months ago, and when Amy said she wanted to go see it, I was very adamant about going to the theater, but we didn't get a chance to, so we watched it on streaming, and it was a very entertaining movie. It's an LGBT film as well, directed by Ethan Coen, one of the Coen brothers. So if you're interested in checking it out, give it a shot. Margaret Qualley is in Poor Things, and she's also in Once Upon a Time in Mexico, so that's pretty sweet to see her in a leading role. And Geraldine Viswanathan is in Cock Blockers and a couple other movies that I still have not yet seen, but I enjoyed them both and thought the movie was very funny.
Awesome. I've heard some good things about it. I should probably give it a watch.
Yeah, it's worth everybody's time, I would say.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so that's it. That's what I saw this weekend. I meant to go see Boy Kills World, but I will likely get to that over the next week and hopefully something else. But you never know. There's a lot of movies coming out in the next couple of weeks that look pretty good.
It's definitely starting to heat up at the cinemas.
I know. I'm excited.
Me too. So those are the new 2024 movies we saw this week. One of my favorite sections of this podcast.
Mine too. I always love discussing new movies, whether they were good or not.
Same. And so now that portion of the podcast is completed for this week, I think it's time to dive into our Chris Farley picks.
Sounds good to me.
And I believe you go first.
All right, let's get into it. This movie was released in 1997, starring Chris Farley, Nicolette Sheridan, Chris Rock, Soon Tek Ho, and Robin Shou. This movie's a comedy classic to so many people, myself included. This is Beverly Hills Ninja, everybody. Everybody was kung fu fighting.
A movie I'd never seen before.
I know. I'm so excited to hear what you loved or hated about this movie. But we'll get into that shortly. For those of you that have never heard of or seen Beverly Hills Ninja, this movie comes to us from 1997, like I mentioned before, written by Mitchell Klebanoff and Mark Feldberg, directed by Dennis Dugan. This movie is about Haru. He is a white man that has been growing up in a village where ninjas do their training, so says the sensei in the beginning of this movie. The exposition also gives us a little bit of information about a legend that tells of a great white ninja that will one day grace Japan with his presence. So when Haru is actually an infant, he washes up on the shores of Japan, and the ninjas bring him back to their village. They believe that he is the coming of the great white ninja. So what do? They start to train him along with all of the other ninjas. And things aren't really going so well for Haru. He is very uncoordinated, he's very clumsy, he's very Chris Farley. We don't meet Haru as an adult until about 10 minutes into the movie. We see a little bit of exposition of Haru as a child and him trying to impress the sensei and his older brother, his adopted older brother, of course, Gobei, who was played by Robin Shou. If you don't know him by name, he was in Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Big 90s star. He actually was approached to do this movie several different times but he decided not to do it because he didn't know who Chris Farley was, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to do a comedy. Chris Farley and him had a meeting, and Robin Shou said to Chris Farley that he really didn't know how to do comedy. He didn't have any confidence. And Chris Farley just said, all you really got to do is be yourself, and you're going to be playing the older adopted brother to this white clumsy guy that is supposed to be the coming of the great white ninja. So their meeting went very well, and Robin Shou signed on to do the project, which I thought was actually very cool, instead of him just being cast because he was in Mortal Kombat.
It was great to see Liu Kang in this movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Mortal Kombat!
Gotta love the original Mortal Kombat, as awful as it is.
It's so bad it's good, though.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Annihilation, I think, is on a whole other level of just bad.
No, it's just bad. Yeah, it's not fun, it's not entertaining. It makes you angry because it's bad.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I haven't seen Annihilation in like 25 years, but I've gone back to watch the OG Mortal Kombat many times.
I rewatched Mortal Kombat in the last 5 years, and it's really fun. As a 90s kid, there's a lot of nostalgia there. It's a good time.
It definitely is. But let's get back a little bit more into Beverly Hills Ninja and the breakdown of this movie. As much fun as we can have talking about Mortal Kombat. Sounds like we'll have to put Mortal Kombat on the list at some point.
Apparently.
It's a great movie, great game, good times.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's time to graduate. They're about to be granted ninjahood by their sensei, who is played by Sun Tae-ko. Unfortunately, Haru is unable to graduate. He's just so uncoordinated. He has no skills whatsoever. So one night, all of the ninjas are going out on a retreat, and Haru is asked to stay back because he's not a ninja. And I actually kind of like this moment, as simple as it is.
Haru, tonight's exercise is for the ninjas only. But your job is an important one. You are to remain here to protect the village and guard the dojo.
I shall do as you say. I shall protect the village. I shall guard the dojo. And I shall water the plants.
So as Haru is protecting the Takagura dojo, a beautiful Nicolette Sheridan shows up. She's looking for a ninja to help her with her boyfriend, who's named Martin Tanley. She's afraid that he is involved in something very sinister, very illegal, and she needs somebody to track him down and help her to bring him to justice. And Haru, at this point, since he's the only one in the Takagura dojo, he's trying to show her that he actually is the Great White Ninja, because he mentions to her that there's this old saying about the Great White Ninja. He reads her a little bit of a script that unfortunately goes very awry, and he tries to show her a little bit of the skill tactics that he's picked up in the Takagura dojo by his sensei.
They may have a second copy.
Yeah. And I love at the moment when he's like, oh, this is actually not the Great White Ninja legend. This is about the sensei and the two twin geishas. Also a great legend, but not mine. So he moves forward, and one thing leads to another, and she tells him that her name is Sally Jones. She hires Haru to track Martin Tanley, and things kind of start going awry as Haru is tracking Martin Tanley the next day. He kills a guy, and Haru is unfortunately pegged as the killer. So his sensei is very upset with him, but Haru is very much on the level that Sally Jones is not trying to set him up, and he needs to go to the hills of Beverly to find Sally Jones and help her with this Martin Tanley guy. So after some convincing of Haru to the Sensei finally agrees to let Haru go to America, to Beverly Hills, it's in the title, and track down Sally Jones and Martin Tanley, and basically try and protect Sally Jones from Martin Tanley and any other sinister wrongdoings. And for the rest of the movie, we're treated to not only Chris Farley, but Chris Rock coming together at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and to some fantastic slapstick comedy, some, of course, great physical comedy by Chris Farley, a couple of decent action sequences as well, and we also are treated to Chris Rock being trained by Haru to be the Great Black Ninja. It's a light movie. It's not super insane over the top, although it's Chris Farley, so there's definitely some over the top moments. There is a scene in a strip club that I think is hysterical, and my favorite sequence is at the Benihana restaurant, honestly. I think that is, like, still, it makes me laugh with tears streaming down my face, and I've been watching this movie since it came out in 1997. I never did see it in theaters, but I've owned a VHS copy, I have it on DVD, and like I said, my wife likes this movie, and there's an actor out there in the world that calls this his favorite comedy. But before we get into the reveal of who that actor is, V, for your first time watching Beverly Hills Ninja, how much did you hate or how much did you love this movie?
I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. I came in
wonderful.
with tempered expectations. It's a 90s film. It's a Chris Farley film. It didn't get the greatest reviews when it came out. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be really stupid. But I laughed out loud repeatedly throughout this film.
Awesome.
From the beginning, there are a lot of very funny parts. I love when he gets accused of murder because the guy that gets assassinated literally falls into his boat.
Yes.
And he's such a bumbling idiot. You know, there's actually a lot of great physical comedy that I really enjoyed that aren't just stupid, easy jokes, right? They actually put some thought into them. And one of them was when he gets to Beverly Hills and he's being a ninja, right? And he's all dressed up and he's got the grappling hook and the rope and he throws it up onto the roof and he's trying to climb up to the roof and the satellite dish gets pulled off because that's what he's hooked onto.
Oh yeah, that moment is wonderful, and that scene involves a couple Doberman pinchers too, which is always fun.
Yes, shout out to Shannon. That's right.
Yeah,
that's something else I was going to bring up, and so I really enjoyed the movie and my time watching it. If it's on TNT or something, I certainly would watch the rest of it. I wouldn't change the channel. I'd sit down and be like, "Oh, cool, the rest of Beverly Hills Ninja. I'll pop that on. That's fine."
Definitely.
So yeah, I had a great time. I think it's a perfect pairing to my pick as well, and just
for sure
further illustrates the comedy of Chris Farley, which is what we're trying to do this episode. And
oh yeah,
and yeah, it's some harmless, fun comedy, and I had a great time.
Awesome. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. Because when I watched it this time around, I had a great time as always, but I was like, I think V is not going to like this one. Because, I mean, you know, your pick is so much more well-renowned than Beverly Hills Ninja, but it's still like we said, the physical comedy is there. His signature scream is throughout this movie and used just fantastically. One of my favorite scenes is when he first gets to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and, well, listen to this.
Perhaps I shall send Dom Perignon to your room.
I prefer to be alone tonight. Perhaps later I will meet your friend Don.
Yes, I love how innocent he is and just how ignorant and naive he is of the Western world. And one of the things that he keeps doing, which I actually loved because I'm a huge proponent of taking your shoes off inside your house.
Oh.
It's a really big deal to me. I do not like shoes in my home especially.
I'll keep that in mind.
And because he's Japanese or raised Japanese, he keeps taking his shoes off before he enters the hotel. And the poor janitor keeps picking up his shoes because he keeps leaving them there. And it's this running gag throughout the movie. And I just thought that was great. I mean, how clever.
I completely agree. It was so great. Just especially later on when he takes his shoes off and he like looks around and goes, where? And he just like forgets about it. He's like, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it right now. And he keeps going into the hotel. I love when he first gets to his room and he starts like bouncing around the room and Chris Rock's like, what's going on, man? Are you some kind of spy or something? It's, a spy is nothing compared to a ninja. And he's like, a ninja? You're a ninja? Just all around good fun. And then, of course, you know, like you said, he's so naive to the Western world. When he's driving around and people are calling him asshole, he thinks it's a compliment. So he thanks everybody and calls him asshole after that. And everybody's kind of like, what the hell is going on? Another sequence later on that still is next to the Benihana sequence is when he is when he goes to meet Will Sasso's character with Nicolette Sheridan. And what they end up doing with him is so hysterical. And Will Sasso is actually uncredited in this movie, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. Maybe that was a Will Sasso thing. Maybe that was a studio thing. I don't know. But Will Sasso has always made me laugh, and the fact that he's in this movie as Chet Walters is so great. That sequence is great because they're trying to get information from Chet Walters with what he's doing with Martin Tanley. So later on, Haru ends up posing as Chet Walters because he finds out that Martin Tanley has never actually met Chet Walters. He's only talked to him on the phone. And the lines that Farley has in the car while they are driving to the warehouse just kill me every time. I think they're hysterical. And it's just so, and like you said, it's so simple, but it's just so effective. And I think it works so much because of the way Farley delivers everything. And it's, again, this movie makes me laugh and has for decades. And I will tell you now who the actor is that calls this movie his favorite comedy of all time. I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
At who it is. We've discussed him before in a pick of mine about race cars.
Christian Bale?
Christian Bale thinks this is one of the funniest movies he's ever seen. And I got to agree with him. I have to. It makes me laugh every time. Every time I show this to other people that haven't seen it, they end up also very much enjoying it. Similar, V, to you, apparently. So I'm very glad to hear that you enjoyed it. And like you said, it's on the verge of clean. There's a couple of things that are definitely PG-13 for this movie, like the strip club scene. Mm-hmm. And Chris Farley was very adamant about the script being more family-friendly than on the adult side, which the studio wanted to originally go more adult with it and make it a harder PG-13 rating. But Chris Farley talked them into bringing it down a little bit, sugarcoating some things, and making it a little bit more innocent for families.
Well, and one thing that I was really worried about coming into this film and not seeing it before, he's playing a ninja. There's a lot of Asian characters in this film. I was very worried it was going to be dated and a bit racially insensitive, and it absolutely isn't. And I was very thankful for that. And I think that's why, as a new viewer, I can see it as very funny, and it had a really good time. And it's pretty innocent in a lot of ways.
It really is, yeah. And Dennis Dugan directed this movie. If you don't know him by name, he's directed just about all of the Adam Sandler films. And I think he did a great job with this movie. The reason Chris Rock is in this movie is because they were looking at a lot of other people to play that character. He's not the biggest part of the movie, but he is in it a good amount of time. And Chris Farley was actually the one that petitioned for Chris Rock to be in the movie because they had spent so many years on Saturday Night Live together that Chris Farley wanted to have Chris Rock on the movie with him. And I thought that was great because I thought that they played off each other so well.
Mm-hmm. They really did. And it was really nice to see Chris Rock in the film.
Yeah, young Chris Rock, you know?
Yes, and just how he's introduced, where he's a bellhop and he's complaining of carpal tunnel.
Oh, yeah. He doesn't want to go on disability and sue the company for millions of dollars. I know, it's so funny. This movie was originally given to Dana Carvey in 1990. He was cast as Haru, as the Great White Ninja. And I would love to see a Dana Carvey Beverly Hills Ninja. I think that would be so much fun.
It could be, although I do remember Master of Disguise, which is one of the worst films ever made.
Yeah, that movie is really terrible. Yeah. I don't think I laughed once during that movie, and I remember just feeling bad for everybody. Even Brent Spiner, like, what are you doing in this movie, man? But needless to say, it did not go to Dana Carvey in 1990. The script of this movie started making its rounds through studios in 1986. After being bounced around to several different studios, TriStar ended up getting the script back and the rights back, and then it went into kind of development hell up until like 1996 when they were able to get Chris Farley attached to the project. And Chris Farley ended up, similar to Robin Shou, turning this movie down multiple times because he really was not super interested in doing another movie where he was kind of a buffoon because of Tommy Boy, Black Sheep. But he ended up also getting, his last offer was while he was shooting Black Sheep, the studio came back with an offer of $6 million on the movie. And Chris Farley had a discussion with his dad about it, and his dad said to him, "Son, you don't turn down that kind of money." So Chris Farley took the role and the $6 million. And, you know, hey, if you're going to offer me $6 million, I'll do almost anything in a PG-13 rated movie.
I was going to say, except movies that are filmed in the San Fernando Valley, right?
Except those, yes, indeed.
PG-13. I like
it.
Yes.
This is unfortunately one of Chris Farley's final films, because as we all know, the man did pass away about a year after this movie was released. This movie was released in January of 1997, and very shortly after that, we lost Chris Farley to a very unfortunate drug overdose. I will always remember that day because it was a sad day for everybody. I was a big Saturday Night Live fan, and I loved a lot of the stuff that he and Adam Sandler did on Saturday Night Live, especially with David Spade. I'm sure we'll get into more of that when we get onto your pick, V. But it was really sad, and I don't know how many people might know this or not, but Chris Farley was originally going to be the voice of Shrek. But he ended up dying before he finished recording the movie, and then Mike Myers took over the role. Chris Farley was very much into this movie and trained 6 months in martial arts. So
really?
He actually did, he did a lot of training. He was very worried also that his training would come in too good a handy while shooting the movie. So him and Robin Shou actually practiced with each other so that Chris Farley wouldn't actually hit anybody, which is what he was most afraid of while shooting the movie. as we're watching Haru early on in the movie in the Takagura Dojo doing a lot of these tests that all these other ninjas are doing, he actually learned how to do all of that. I mean, that's pretty impressive for a guy of Chris Farley's stature, you know? I mean, obviously we all know him as a pretty big dude, but he was also so physically agile too. Like, he could run pretty fast, he could jump pretty high, and he did actually most of his own stunts in this movie. He got hurt one time when he was trying to bust through the wall of the Takagura Dojo, but he ended up hitting a stud on one of the walls, and he really hurt his shoulder. But everything else he pretty much did on his own, which is really impressive stuff. This, like I mentioned before, the movie came out January 17th of 1997. The budget was $18 million.
Whoa, that is a lot.
Yeah, and $6 million of it went to
Chris
Farley, so congrats to him, which means there were $12 million for locations, other actors, and film. The opening box office for Beverly Hills Ninja came in at $12.2 million. Not great, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Worldwide box office was $31.4 million.
Ugh.
Yeah, not great either. And very unfortunately, Chris Farley was very, very upset with the outcome of the movie. He ended up crying in the premiere because he thought that it was just so bad.
Really?
Yeah, which is kind of heartbreaking to hear because clearly we both like it. Christian Bale loves it. And, you know, so many other people that I've mentioned to, like, if you've seen Beverly Hills Ninja, like, oh, of course, it's Chris Farley. How can you not love that movie? And I completely agree. And I've done the year 1997 before. Highest grossing film of 1997 was Men in Black. Number 2 was Lost World Jurassic Park. Number 3 was Liar Liar. Number 10, George of the Jungle. Number 12, V, a pick of yours. Hercules. Number 25, The Fifth Element. Number 34, a future pick of mine. Starship Troopers. Number 36, Anastasia. And the 66th highest grossing film of 1997, coming in with $31.4 million, starring Chris Farley, Chris Rock, and Nicolette Sheridan, Beverly Hills Ninja.
Wow, it was still in the top 100.
Top hundo. And I have mentioned before, I did watch my DVD copy, but if you would like to stream the film, if you have not seen it before, you can stream it on Amazon, AMC Plus, or Netflix.
That's how I watched it.
There you go. So that's Beverly Hills Ninja. V, I'm so glad that you enjoyed the movie. It is a top 100 of mine, honestly, because it just makes me laugh every time. And it's a feel-good movie. It's one of those comfort movies, you know, like when you're sick, put on Beverly Hills Ninja. If you feel like laughing, Beverly Hills Ninja. Something ridiculous, something fun. Pop on Beverly Hills Ninja. You're bound to have a good time.
I agree.
Sweet. Well, V, I think it's time to hit the road and sell some car parts. What do you say?
I think that's a great idea.
All right, let's do it.
We're going to rewind 2 years to 1995 to Chris Farley's most famous, most beloved role. This is Tommy Boy.
Yes.
Co-starring David Spade, Brian Dennehy, Bo Derek, and Rob Lowe. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched this film, especially with all of my sisters and my family. We watched this so many times in the 90s together.
I only very recently saw this for the first time within the last 10 years.
Oh my God. That's
I know.
crazy. And now I'm really curious about your opinion because I rewatched this film for the first time in a while, actually, because I'd seen it so many times growing up. And rewatching it, I realized a lot of it had to do with nostalgia. It is a funny movie, but I love it deeply because of the nostalgic factor. And so I'm curious about your opinion because my sisters and I still quote this movie to this day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so there's a big emotional tie-in for me that makes this film so good, in my opinion.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Again, the first time I watched it, I laughed very hard. The second time I watched it, I also laughed very hard because I didn't remember a whole lot of it. It was a 90s staple. I mean, I remember everybody in elementary school being like, oh, I went and saw Tommy Boy this weekend. I think a reason why I didn't get to it until so later on in life was because it was one of those movies that so many people were like, oh, Tommy Boy's the greatest. It's so great. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's so funny. And I was like, I'm really afraid I'm going to watch this movie and it's not going to be funny because of how many times people have told me how funny it is. But when I watched it the first and now this second time, it's hysterical. Not only is it because of Chris Farley and David Spade, but Rob Lowe is hysterical in it.
Yes.
And he's very similar to Benjamin in Wayne's World in this movie.
A little more nefarious, but yes.
Yeah. And Bo Derek, I like of course, the reference that they make when Bo Derek walks out of the pool. Thought that was great.
Dad, she's a 10.
Yeah. And Brian Dennehy was great. David Spade. I think David Spade is supposed to be somewhat insufferable in this movie, and he plays it so well.
Yes.
So big shout out to David Spade. Thank you for dropping by our Instagram page the other day when I posted that I was watching this movie. So if you listen to this episode, we are big fans of yours. V has another one of your movies on their list coming up shortly here.
That's true.
But yeah, overall, I mean, it becomes a road trip movie, which is also fun, and I love the fact that Dan Aykroyd's in the movie also. So it's Saturday Night Live alum again coming together to bring a great comedy, and similar to Beverly Hills Ninja, it is PG-13, but it's pretty family friendly. Like, there's not a whole lot going on in this movie that you'd cover your kid's eyes for.
Yeah.
Maybe the one scene at the pool in the evening at the hotel, but
and that's just implied. I did not understand that scene at all until much later in life.
So funny. I think it's one of the funnier moments of the movie, but it's just a lot of fun, and it's a simple story too, know,
which I'll get into in a second.
Yes. So V, why don't you jump into that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for that setup, and I'm so glad to hear that you enjoyed the film. And like you said, we'll talk about that more in a minute. But Tommy Boy starts off with Thomas Callahan III at Marquette University, and he's running late, unfortunately, and you can see in a flashback at the beginning of this film that's something that's been his problem for a very long time, running late to school. And it turns out he's running late to a final, and in his history final, he opens up the page, and the first question is, all of these founding fathers, and please fill in this name of blank Hancock, and of course he fills in Herbie Hancock, the musician.
So funny.
So immediately you can see that Tommy isn't book smart at all. And the grades come out, and he jostles over to the sign on the bulletin board and looks at his grade. And I don't know if you caught it, but Helen Keller is listed as one of the people testing that day, which is awesome. And he goes, D+. Oh my God, I passed.
They don't hand out a whole lot of D+.
Yeah, I'm gonna graduate.
So funny.
And so Tommy has now graduated college from Marquette University and is flying home to Sandusky, Ohio, and he's picked up by David Spade, who he's known since elementary school. He plays a man named Richard, and he and Tommy have always butted heads because David Spade is nerdy, uptight, and works hard, and Tommy is, of course, the exact opposite of that.
Very much so. Oh, you get an office. You've only been here 15 minutes.
Exactly. And that's very apparent when he picks him up from the airport.
Did you hear I finally graduated?
Yeah, and just a shade under a decade, too. All right.
You know, a lot of people go to college for 7 years.
I know. They're called doctors.
And there are so many one-liners in this film. I'll try to discuss most of them, but goddamn, there's just so many. You'll have to watch the film to get them all.
Oh, yeah.
But there's, as I said, still a bunch that my sisters and I quote to each other to this day. And now that Tommy's home and back with his father, Big Tom Callahan, played by Brian Dennehy, and as you said, he gets an office, even though he's done no work whatsoever.
Yep.
Which is a perfect example of nepotism in this country.
Absolutely.
But Big Tom Callahan, his dad, actually has some pretty big news. And they go home, and Big Tom says he wants to introduce Tommy to somebody, and they go into the backyard where the pool is, and there's a wonderful shot of Bo Derek getting out of the pool.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Big Tom is actually getting married.
Yeah. I love that too. He says, whoa, Dad, is that for me? He's like, no, son, that's for me.
And a nice bonus for Tommy is that Beverly actually has a son.
Yes.
Paul, played by Rob Lowe. And the introduction to this character is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Because he gets off a bus and he's drinking milk, and this little shithead kid is making a bunch of faces to him through the bus window because the kid's still on the bus. And Paul just reaches up and smacks the window really hard, and the window reverberates off the kid's head. And he finishes up his carton of milk, crunches it up, and tosses it into a baby carriage. He's such a dick. And of course, Tommy is so excited to have a brother because he's an only child and has been alone for most of his life. And of course, it's Sandusky, Ohio, and he's got to take Paul out on the town.
Oh, yeah.
So is there anything to do in this town besides eat?
Tons of stuff. Late night pitch and putt. We go to the livestock auction, cruise the 4-H babes, throw stuff off the bridge. What do you feel like doing?
And this is exactly how we used to describe my hometown because I grew up in the middle of nowhere with lots of farmland.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah, because then, of course, it leads to cow tipping.
It does lead to cow tipping.
I love that whole sequence at the gas station, too. The whole maniac moment is just so ridiculous, but so funny.
It is, and that's a perfect way to describe this movie. It's ridiculous, but so funny. And now everybody's really excited because Tommy's home, and even though he's an idiot, when he tours the factory because he's back home from college, everybody's excited to see him. Everybody says hi to him. He's a really nice guy. You know, he's one of those dumb, lovable teddy bears, right? It's a very classic character trope, and so, of course, everyone loves him, even though he's a bit bumbling. And everyone's getting really excited for Big Tom's wedding coming up that weekend. And cut to the wedding ceremony, and everything goes well. And during the wedding reception, Tommy and his dad get up on stage and start singing together.
Yes.
But unfortunately, Big Tom has a heart attack and dies. So now his new wife and his son Tommy are left with the responsibility of taking care of this large auto manufacturing company, which basically keeps the town afloat.
Yeah.
However, his dad has taken out some pretty big loans to build out a brake pad manufacturing section of the factory. Now the factory is in debt and at risk of being closed down, and Tommy offers to go on his dad's yearly sales trip to try to sell all these new brake pads. But the board says, look, we appreciate your offer, but you don't know anything about this. You know, you've been out at college, you haven't sold before, you know, how are you going to do this? And he points to Richard and he says, well, Richard knows everything about brake pads. Let's go together.
Yep.
And so now Richard's been roped in, even though he definitely doesn't want to go, on this sales trip. And what follows is Richard and Tommy trying to navigate this sales trip. Tommy trying to learn the business and, of course, being an idiot the whole time about it. Not doing well, failing time and time again, embarrassing both himself and Richard being fed up, of course, because Richard's been working his ass off his whole life, and Tommy comes in and is basically running this company.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the reasons it's so funny is that they keep going on all these sales stops, and every time Tommy screws up in a different way.
Yes.
And first he just leaves every time he hears a no, and then he screws up a joke and embarrasses everyone, and then he takes these model cars on this guy's desk and tries to tell a story about why their brake pads are better. And
love that.
It just ruins the whole situation, and it
sets it on fire.
So funny. Here comes the meat wagon.
Yeah.
It's just so good. This is what happens when you use the other guy's brake pads. And it's just so ridiculous. And of course, it's Chris Farley just riffing this whole entire time. And you can't help but just laugh because it's so good.
And how does David Spade sit there and not break character?
Totally.
And it's a 2-shot. And you're just like...
It is.
What the hell? Like, I would be completely losing my mind.
I would not be able to keep a straight face at all.
I don't think I would.
No matter how many shots we did.
Yeah, I'm curious though. Like, I wonder if that was like the first take, or if that was maybe like take 30 because David Spade did keep fucking laughing, and finally he was like, you know what? I've seen it enough. I won't break character this time around. It's impressive, especially when you see a comedy where there's so much going on with one character and there's got to be the straight man next to him. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, how do you not...
lose it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It reminds me of The Other Guys when Will Ferrell's the straight man and Mark Wahlberg's in there in his house,
gosh.
and he's trying to talk shit about Eva Mendes. And I'm like, how did you keep a straight face when doing this?
I know.
So good. And things progress and get more dire because, of course, as I said, these sales stops are not going well. And here comes Dan Aykroyd's character, Zelensky, who basically owns like a Kragen Napa auto parts chain, right? It's a national chain. He actually is coming in to try to buy Callahan Auto Parts because it's in trouble. And he is hilarious in this film as well.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, as things get more dire, Richard and Tommy butt heads even more and more because Richard's getting so fed up with his buffoonery.
Yeah.
And at one point, they're arguing on the side of the road because Richard's car is used for this road trip, and it's just getting beat to hell through all of this idiocy. And Richard gets so mad that he's like, all right, that's it. And they get out of the car, and Tommy's like, oh, let's go. I'll just even give you a couple of free shots because, of course, David Spade is this skinny little guy, and Chris Farley is this big dude, right?
Right.
David Spade's hitting him in the face, and Chris Farley was like, whatever, like, is there a strong wind? Like, I can't feel anything. And so finally Richard grabs a 2x4 and hits him across the face with it. And of course that leads to my next favorite one-liner when they go to a diner, and of course it's this awkward silence, and Tommy goes, man, do I have a mark on my face? And Richard's like, nope, not at all. And Tommy's like, really? Because it doesn't hurt here so much, or here, but right here. And he points right to his cheek, and it's like totally busted up. And Richard's like, nope, I actually don't see anything. And of course, the waitress comes by, and she's like, whoa, dude, what happened to your face?
Yeah.
And it's just stuff like that. It's so great. They have great chemistry. They play off each other really well. And Tommy, again, similar to your movie, being kind of an idiot makes this really funny, but he's not so stupid that he gets annoying, right?
Yes.
Every joke in this movie is hilarious when he's trying to get to Chicago to meet with Zelensky, and he's talking to the ticket attendant at the desk, and she's like, well, I can get you a flight back from Chicago. And my sisters and I quote that all the time.
I'm Earth. Have we met?
I don't think so. Exactly. She's such an idiot too.
Oh, yeah.
And as things get more dire, he's of course trying everything. And at one point, he walks into a bank because he's trying to get somebody's attention, and he yells out, all right, this will only take a second. Of course, it's like a bank robbery. And again, it's just him trying his best and getting into these most ridiculous situations, and it's such a funny movie. And as you said, it's pretty family friendly. It's pretty innocent.
Yeah.
And I think it's still funny to this day.
Completely agreed. Beyond the one-liners, there are moments also when they're on the side of the road. I think Tommy's sister was like, you couldn't sell a ketchup popsicle or something like that. And I love that line because ketchup popsicle just does not sound good at all.
Oh, no.
And I love ketchup.
No, when Richard's talking about Tommy's dad and what a great salesman he is, and he's like, yeah, he could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves.
Okay, there it is. I couldn't remember exactly what it was. Again, only my second time seeing the movie. But I love that part. I love when they're at the gas station also, and Tommy backs the car up and totally fucks the door. And then Richard comes out and grabs the door, and it falls off. And just the simplicity of, what'd you do? Like, I just love that. It's so great. And Richard just looks at him like, what the hell happened while I was inside? It really is a great movie, and it's another like feel good movie. I think this and Beverly Hills Ninja not only are a great pairing for this episode, but that's like a perfect like rainy day set of movies. You know, like you start your day with Tommy Boy and maybe end with Beverly Hills Ninja, or you watch them back to back because they're just both just so much fun.
Absolutely. Or even when you're having a barbecue and you have friends over, because these are the type of movies that you don't have to pay super close attention to. They can just be on while you guys all go in and out to the backyard when you're barbecuing, and you'll walk by and catch a joke and laugh and keep going so you can go grab something from the ice chest. You know, it's a great summertime movie as well.
Definitely.
And of course, I still pull the housekeeping line on my sisters from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, this movie's great. If anybody hasn't watched it yet, I think it still holds up. I think it still can be considered very funny, and a lot of people can have a good time watching this film.
I completely agree with that.
I'm so glad you like it, and I'm so glad you watched it again.
As am I. Thank you for picking it.
Yeah. And since this is a Chris Farley episode, I'm going to talk about his credits a little bit. Of course, he was on SNL for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in a van down by the river.
My favorite skit of his.
Oh, really?
Yes. And especially now that I want a camper van.
One of my favorites was him, David Spade, and Adam Sandler, where they were all
girls
dressed as women. Yeah. at the Gap store, or like a clothing store, and Alec Baldwin was in the episode too. And Alec Baldwin had been with David Spade and Adam Sandler, but not with Chris Farley. It's just so funny.
And then Chris Farley gets hungry and his voice gets super low.
Yeah.
So good. No, that is a great skit too. I
Yes,
agree.
it is.
And he also makes an appearance in Wayne's World 1 and 2.
Yes, he does. He's Milton in the second one, and he's the security guard in the first one.
I love him as the security guard in the first one where he's explaining where the record executive is going. So
Drive through Chicago on his way to Detroit. For a security guard, he had an awful lot of information, don't you think? I love that.
And he's also in Coneheads, which also stars Dan Aykroyd. Airheads is also another movie he's in.
Is he in Airheads?
Yeah, he's got a bit part.
Oh, wow. Airheads is a good one.
And then he and David Spade paired up together again in Black Sheep.
Never saw Black Sheep.
Me either. Tommy Boy was my jam.
Yeah. I know he's in Billy Madison as the bus driver.
Yeah, he's uncredited in that, yeah. He and David Spade actually met on SNL. They were writers first.
Oh, sweet.
David Spade was also in Coneheads.
Oh.
And then he went on to star in Joe Dirt.
I hear a lot of people like it. I just never got around to it.
It was not one of those movies that I watched. It's just too much of a dirtbag movie, I think. And then he and Brian Dennehy starred together in Just Shoot Me.
Just Shoot Me is a fantastic sitcom.
It absolutely is.
I could not believe how funny every episode was.
Mm-hmm.
Literally the entirety of that show. Oh my gosh. Wendy Malick.
Oh, I love her
Unbelievable.
so much. And then, of course, they're
So
together in a movie I'll mention in just a second.
Oh.
But before I do that, he was actually in a previous pick of mine because he has a small part in Grandma's Boy, episode 53.
Yes, he does.
Hi, my name's Shiloh. Welcome to the vegan restaurant.
You know what everybody's going nuts about is the bean sprout quesadilla. Oh, man.
My two favorite credits of his, though, are another sitcom called Rules of Engagement.
Oh, I don't think I ever saw that one.
Patrick Warburton's in it.
Oh.
It is my all-time favorite sitcom. It's hysterical. I loved every single episode. There were 100 episodes, and I bought the whole series because it's so good.
Oh, nice. I'd never seen that one.
Highly recommend, especially for people who are married or in a relationship. It's so funny.
All right, let's check it out then.
So that's my favorite TV credit of David Spade's, but of course my favorite movie credit of his is The Emperor's New Groove.
Yes, of course. I think that's almost everybody's. I do love him, though, in a movie called Bench Warmers with John Heder and Rob Schneider. That one is pretty damn funny.
And Wendy Malick plays Poncho's wife in The Emperor's New Groove, too.
That's right. Oh, yes.
Brian Dennehy, as I mentioned, plays Big Tom Callahan and David Spade's dad in Just Shoot Me. And he plays the sheriff in First Blood, the first Rambo movie.
Oh, cool.
He's also in Cocoon.
Nice.
And he plays the father in one of your earliest picks. It's an adaptation. It's got an amazing soundtrack. It's from episode 4. Early pick. Based on Shakespeare's classic play.
Oh, that's right. Yes, he was Romeo's father.
Yes, Lord Montague in Romeo and Juliet.
Right. Hell yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy because my compliment to your pick of Romeo and Juliet in episode 4 is Stardust.
Oh, yeah.
And Martin, in your movie, Beverly Hills Ninja, this week is played by Nathaniel Parker.
Okay.
He plays the father in Stardust.
Oh, whoa, really?
Yeah, so our two movies from this week each have an actor who played the fathers from episode 4 movies.
That's pretty cool.
Weird connection.
Yeah, that is. That's pretty awesome, though.
Yeah. And of course, Bo Derek, she is famous for being a model, being in the movie 10.
Oh, yeah.
And Rob Lowe, as I said, plays Paul the brother, or the stepbrother, I should say. His first movie credit was The Outsiders. He was also in Wayne's World, playing Benjamin.
If Benjamin were an ice cream flavor, he'd be pralines and dick.
Thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
He also plays the young number 2 in Austin Powers.
That's right, he does. Oh, my gosh.
He's so good.
He is. He's great in comedy. I thought he was awesome in Parks and Rec, too.
And I just love his attitude in Parks and Rec. He is such a good example and someone to strive to be.
Ben Wyatt. I always liked that whole, he was always very entertaining to watch.
Mm-hmm. And of course, he was also in The West Wing for a whole lot of episodes.
Oh, wow. I guess I haven't seen The West Wing in a long time.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Bonnie and Terry Turner wrote this film.
Yes, they did.
They are a screenwriting couple, and
Yep.
of course you know who they are because they wrote Wayne's World 1 and 2.
Yes, they most certainly did.
They also wrote Coneheads. They created and wrote Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh my gosh. Another brilliant sitcom from beginning to end that should have gone on for far more seasons than it did, but they went out perfectly with Third Rock from the Sun.
The worst thing for any TV show is going on too long.
Unfortunately, that's true.
They also wrote and created that 70s show.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was a great series as well. Not so much the last 2 seasons because Topher Grace was gone, but still a great series.
I agree. And so
supporting cast was great on that one.
Yes. Bonnie and Terry Turner, great comedic writers.
Hell yeah.
Peter Segal directed this movie. He also directed My Fellow Americans that has James Gardner and Jack Lemmon in it.
Nice.
He also wrote Anger Management, a film I recently introduced you to a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
That was so
very
fun.
entertaining movie.
I loved watching that movie together. He also directed 50 First Dates.
Great movie.
The Longest Yard, the Adam Sandler remake.
Great movie.
And Get Smart.
Not a great movie.
I disagree, but he did direct some really great comedies.
No, absolutely. I've been meaning to revisit Get Smart. I may not have just been in the right mood for it or something. I don't know.
Possibly. Yeah, I hope you give it another chance. And Rob Lowe's part is actually uncredited in this film.
Is it really?
Yeah, he wanted it to be a happy surprise, and he was also contracted to be in The Stand at the same time, so he needed to be uncredited.
Oh, wow.
The film originally centered around the relationship between Tommy and Paul, so he actually originally had a much bigger role.
No kidding.
Yeah, and he was playing tennis with Lorne Michaels, who is the creator of SNL. Still runs it to this day. And Lorne told Rob that he was about to start Tommy Boy and he was considering him to play Chris Farley's brother in the movie. And because they were friends, Rob Lowe took the part and was not bothered when his role got a bit smaller.
Interesting.
And of course they were friends because Rob Lowe had been in Wayne's World, which is a Lorne Michaels produced film.
Yes, of course.
And the cow tipping scene was an idea that Rob Lowe pitched.
No way.
Which is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the scene after that, where Paul is spraying off the mud, it was below 20 degrees Fahrenheit because they were filming it in Canada.
Oh my gosh.
And so Chris Farley wore a wetsuit under his clothes to keep from freezing.
Oh man. Wow.
So when Tommy is very, very braced by that cold water, it's real.
Oh man.
Yeah. And as the script was revolving and moving past the relationship between Tommy and Paul, Lorne Michaels would watch Chris Farley and David Spade's interaction in their office in the writer's room in Saturday Night Live. He thought they made a good team, and that's why the role of Richard was created.
Oh, very cool.
And it was written just for David Spade.
Nice.
Yeah. But because they were both on SNL at the time, they were both, David Spade and Chris Farley, flying back and forth from Toronto to New York every single weekend. And they were working 7 days a week.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah. And the reason why Marquette University was selected is that's actually Chris Farley's alma mater. He was on the Marquette rugby team, and that's why he wore that jacket.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And like Beverly Hills Ninja, Chris wanted to do all of his own stunts.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And that includes in the beginning of the film when he's at that frat party and he passes out and falls flat on his face on that table.
Whoa.
Chris Farley did it.
Damn. What a trooper.
Yeah. And that scene when Richard hits him with the 2x4.
Yeah.
Well, it was made of wood, but the part that was supposed to hit Chris Farley was, of course, replaced with rubber.
Yeah.
But Spade messed up and grabbed the wrong end and hit Chris Farley full in the face with a 2x4.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So was that not even makeup then?
I think it still was, but it certainly rung his bell.
Oh, wow. That is insane.
Yes. And Zelensky, played by Dan Aykroyd, works in a giant skyscraper because, of course, he owns a national chain of auto parts stores.
Right.
Was that skyscraper familiar in any way?
Yes, it was.
It's in an early pick of mine.
Okay.
It is most definitely a Christmas movie.
Oh, all right. Die Hard.
It's Nakatomi Plaza from Die Hard, yes.
Nice. Very cool.
That is Fox Plaza located in Los Angeles.
Hell yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a scene in this movie where a deer gets hit by a car.
Yes.
And I swear, audience, we are not evil or callous. The deer ends up being okay. We're not laughing at the fact that a deer got run over. Just had to spoil that piece for our audience.
Definitely.
So we don't seem too twisted. But they unfortunately hit a deer with the car, and they feel so bad. They can't just leave it there. So they put the deer in the back seat. Of course, a little bit later on, while they're driving, the deer wakes up and they pull over, and the deer needs to get out of the car. And there's a final shot where the deer, triumphant, is standing on top of this car.
Yeah.
It took 5 weeks with a deer trainer to get the deer to stand on top of that car.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
They took a car and parked it in a paddock with the deer, and they fed it all around the car and on top of it. And finally, after a month or so, the deer climbed up onto the top of that car, and they got that shot, and that's the shot that ended up in the movie.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy.
Who'd have thought that would have been the most complicated shot of Tommy Boy?
Seriously. That's madness.
Yes. And the housekeeping scene is an actual prank that David Spade used to pull on Chris Farley.
Awesome.
Yes. And even though now this is a beloved film, when it was released in 1995, it had a budget of $20 million.
Wow.
Which, because of the cast, makes a little more sense than your film, because there's Dan Aykroyd, Bo Derek, Rob Lowe. But unfortunately, the worldwide gross was only $33 million.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, and that's crazy to think of, because now it's this classic comedy that people still talk about to this day, nearly 30 years later. And that's because Tommy Boy is one of Paramount's top 10 best-selling videos of all time.
Oh, very cool.
Joining the ranks of the Indiana Jones movies, Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, Wayne's World, and Forrest Gump, the film made nearly $100 million in home video sales.
That's awesome.
Yes. And lastly, similar to your film, there is someone who lists Tommy Boy as one of their favorite all-time comedies.
Oh, okay.
He's a director.
Okay.
We've talked about him a lot, but we've never picked one of his films.
Okay.
He likes to work with Uma Thurman.
Tarantino?
Tommy Boy is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite comedies of all time.
Wow, that's cool.
He loves it so much he owns a 35 millimeter print and sometimes screens it at parties.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I would love to go to one of those parties.
Right? It's so funny because we're such film nerds. We would rather go to one of those parties than like a Playboy Bunny Mansion party.
Yeah.
Which I've actually worked with Playboy Bunnies before, funny enough.
As have I.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so that's Tommy Boy, released in 1995. If you want to rewatch it or give this classic comedy a chance, you can watch it either on Pluto TV or if you have a Paramount Plus subscription.
Which was how I watched it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, John, would you watch Beverly Hills Ninja with your grandma?
I very likely would, yes. I think she would enjoy it to an extent. And V, would you watch Tommy Boy with your grandmother?
I don't think I'd watch it with either of my grandmothers, but I've seen it with my parents innumerable times.
Oh, all right.
Like I said, we still quote this movie to this day in my family, and I actually have a family trip coming up. I might even recommend it to watch it one night while we're all together.
There you go.
Well, that about wraps up our picks for this week's episode honoring Chris Farley comedies. Thank you so much for joining, and next week, we're doing something a little different, actually.
Yes, we are.
To celebrate Mother's Day this year, we decided instead of going with the theme of Mother's Day for our movies, we decided to go back to the source.
Yeah.
John and I both have spoken to our mothers and asked them to recommend movies that they love.
Yes.
So next week, to celebrate Mother's Day, we each are discussing a pick from our moms.
That's going to be a fun one.
Yes, I'm very excited.
Me too.
And appreciate their participation in our podcast.
As do I. Thanks, Mom.
And so please tune in for that next week. And in the meantime, follow us on all of the social media platforms. We are at Movies You Miss Pod. And if you follow us on Instagram, you can watch all our reels for our instant reactions to new movies we've seen in theaters.
Yeah.
I just created my first reel last week, actually, because John's
Indeed you did.
usually the one who does that. And as many of you know, we love to end our podcast with, film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid, except if you think...
The judge made a good call in overturning Harvey Weinstein's conviction.
Oh, God!
That's some bullshit. The courts have failed women yet again.
Yeah, just like with Bill Cosby.
Yep.
That made me quite ill when I read that.
Yeah, that was some horse manure, if I've ever seen a pile.
A truly horrible human being.
You ain't lying.
A good time to once again shout out and support all victims.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. Until next week, bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.